Welcome to In Session by Westside Children's Therapy, the podcast about the real work of pediatric therapy and the tools that help kids find their voice. Whether you're a parent, caregiver, therapist, this is the space where real conversations happen. Each week we sit in session with experts in the field to talk about the work, the wins, the challenges, and the science behind helping kids meet their full potential. I'm your host, Marika Kackett, and I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started. We're in session. Welcome to In Session, the OT podcast. In our first episode, we're going to focus on occupational therapy for our littles. How do we help little kids with big emotions live even bigger and better lives? Welcoming Allie and Alyssa from Westside Children's Therapy to tell us all about how OT can work for you and your family. So one of the things we had talked about was what is OT? And I think so many people, one, don't understand how OT works with kids, but also it's not just sensory.
Yeah, not just sensory. There's a lot more to it.
So tell us, really, for someone who maybe is first hearing this language, when they hear OT, sometimes they might think about occupational therapy, like relearning to do things after an accident. But in a pediatric sense, tell me a little bit about what OT focuses on.
Yeah. I think I want to start OT in general. We're kind of a jack of all trades. We work throughout the lifespan, targeting anything that keeps you from doing what you want or need to do throughout your day. In pediatrics specifically, that heavily falls in the sensory category for us. We do see a lot of sensory kiddos, and it's a big foundation for how we address treatment, looking at that sensory neurophysiological perspective. But we do so much more than that. Again, it's kind of anything that is keeping you from doing what you need to do on a daily basis. So when we think about kids, what is the occupation of a kid?
To play.
To play. Right? So we are facilitating them learning new skills and acquiring new skills to function better throughout their day through play and through engaging fun activities that we can grade up or down based on where they're at and what they're able to tolerate. So we work in a very client-centered fashion where we are working with that kiddo based on their needs and how they're presenting that day, that minute, that second to acquire the skills and find adaptations and find all of the pieces that we can to help them and their family be the most successful.
And how much of OT is, like you said, there's some sensory based, but what if a kid is just struggling in a classroom?
Yeah. We do a lot of work with academics and pre-academics, not necessarily like tutoring style work, but we can work on handwriting, we can work on cutting, we can work on so many of those prerequisite skills that you need, sitting at a table and attending, shifting your attention from going from playing to then transitioning over to a non-preferred activity at the table. Some of those behavioral components too. Alyssa, I don't know if you want to jump in.
Yeah, and I mean, it can even go a little deeper of those social interactions that we have in school and the ability to play and make friends and things like that. Having that ability to use our brain, using cognitive flexibility to, participate in routines or to adapt when things don't go the way that we think they're going to be, especially in school, home, wherever that might be. So we really are, like she said, like a jack of all trades,
I love that. So if you've got a parent who is, they're getting calls, little Johnny's disrupting class, he's pulling a little girl's hair, or he's just not sitting still. I mean, where from the point where, this is just maybe a discipline parenting issue to, hey, maybe I need to talk to somebody, maybe I get some help. What are sort of the red flags or where a parent might need to reach out and say, something's going on and I need help?
Yeah. I think what I always fall back on for OT is it impacting your daily life? Is it causing trouble with accessing academics? Is it creating trouble following the routines that you have and the rituals that you have for your family? I would say at that point, when you're noticing a disturbance or a disruption or a decreased quality of life, that's when we come in.
Absolutely.
And I think too, it really all depends on kind of what is that underlying cause of, that piece, right? Are we, bumping into kids and can't stand still in line when we're, waiting for the bathroom because, our body is telling us we need to move, or I don't know where my limbs are in space? Or is it more hey, I don't really like that kid, I'm going to, give him a little elbow, right? What is that underlying cause of that piece, right? And when is, OT going to get involved then?
And so in a case like that, when OT does get involved, how much of that do you find are children who, because a lot of people say, well, my child is neurodiverse, therefore they do need other services, which is true. But a lot of children who go to OT are not on the spectrum. Mm-hmm. So how often do you see kids that are not on the spectrum? And walk me through some of the things. Because I think we all have like sensory issues. I mean, I said this in another podcast. I don't like sloppy joes. I don't like them. I'm not going to eat them. I don't like the way they look. I don't like the texture. I'm just not going to eat sloppy joes. And I might have a weird sensory issue with some of my foods. I don't like my foods to touch on a plate. That might be a sensory thing, but that's okay. I mean, so you learn to kind of work around it. So for a parent who's noticing things about, like you were saying, like with their kid, and they don't have a concern that they're neurodivergent, is that okay to still seek OT?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Resounding yes. Shouting it from the rooftops, because like we don't see kids based off of diagnoses. We see kids based off of need. We have a wide variety. We have kids who come to us post-birth injury. We have kids who come to us post-hemispherectomy. We have kids who come to us because their teacher noticed that they were having a little bit of trouble writing, or because they were having some trouble regulating their emotions in the classroom. You don't need to have a diagnosis to come to OT, and we will work with you based on whatever the difficulties are to help improve those. What are some of the ways in which, for example, if someone has difficulty sitting still in a class, or you notice, one thing we talked about earlier was executive functioning. What does that mean? So if you've got a parent that has these concerns, let's say, and they've just been thrown the word executive functioning, what does that mean in an OT sense?
Yeah, executive functioning is a pretty broad term as well. There are a lot of things that encompass it. So that might be things like our ability to regulate our emotions, our ability to control our impulses, our ability to maintain attention or shift our attention between various things, our ability to use our brain flexibly. So when something doesn't go as planned, are we able to change and, participate in whatever that change is? And how that can impact in school is, when we're talking about attention and being able to, listen and learn and maybe maintain our body within that classroom, or regulate our emotions when, hey, I can't finish this project because we got to move on to something else. Those are maybe the executive things that, we're looking towards when we're in school. And then from more of kind of like that, you said kind of like that movement based, if like a kid needs a little bit of extra support to help
like they have to get the wiggles out.
Yeah. Exactly. But we have lots of like, not only like tools and adaptations, but, we as OTs can work with the schools to provide them accommodations they might need. Maybe that kid needs a few extra minute break in between lessons. Maybe they just need to go for a walk every 10 to 15 minutes. Maybe there's a sensory space they can take a break. Maybe they need to sit on something that's a little wiggly or fidget with something in their hands, all to help them have access to like a general education classroom.
So you mentioned something really important. You partner with the schools. You partner with parents. So, if you have it, and you're describing the situations, I'm just thinking, this sounds like a kid. You get the wiggles, they can't focus, they're, oh my God, plane, squirrel, right? So what are some of the ways that, like specifically for, let's start with younger kids, like 7 and under, what are some of the most common reasons you would see a kid for OT, whether that's executive function or sensory or whatever? Then in a session, what are some of the things that you do? Because a lot of times parents might say, well, but they're just playing with my kid. Mm-hmm. And we all know kids' number one job is, of course, to play. But when in a session, what are you doing functionally in those sessions? And what are some of the results that parents can see?
We're doing a lot, and it's a lot more than meets the eye. I think we, being so trained in developmental progression and all of those pieces, we know kind of the hierarchy of skills and how they develop. And so there are prerequisite skills for more complex skills down the line. And so, just incorporating play, like if you're working on handwriting, you're going to want to develop some hand strength, develop a good grasp, right? So you might be doing something that is just working on that pincer grasp at first. And that could be anything. That could look like you're just playing a game, or, you're doing whatever, but we're actually targeting something. Or we're looking at, okay, how long are you sustaining attention to this task without us having to verbally prompt you or any of those pieces? So we're working on all of those pieces everything that we do has a purpose, whether it's creating a safe environment, building trust and rapport, regulating their sensory system, working on their motor skills, working on their social and play skills, or working on some of those higher level executive functioning skills. Even, we get some of those older kids who come in too, who I'm sure we'll get to that later, but we do some other executive functioning things with them too, like IEDLs and all of those good pieces. And I think it's just, we are so individually tailored to what that kiddo needs. And that's what we're going to do when they walk through the door. Yeah. We do child-led, but therapist-directed. So we're going to go with their interests, what they want to be doing, but then we're going to shape it to be functional and productive for them.
And I think you mentioned too, it's one-on-one. And I think that's really important to emphasize when you go to an OT session. So we know it's one-on-one. Let's talk about, the parent has decided that they need to seek out an OT therapist. It really starts with the evaluation. Kind of walk us through what happens in an evaluation, because then that really is going to lead what you're going to work on.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, like I would tell parents, if they have any sort of reservations about coming in for an evaluation, reach out. Have that conversation with maybe an OT ahead of time to help prepare the child as much as possible to know what this evaluation is going to look like and what it's going to look like for them. But really, it's kind of a little bit of like a twofold. So when that child comes in, we're going to bring that parent back and we're going to sit down with both of them. And depending on whether the kid is old enough to answer their own questions or whether we're just going through parents, we're really going to get down to the nitty gritty of, why they're here, what are their concerns, and essentially how we can help them. Because sometimes we have families that come in who are just like given an autism diagnosis and the doctor says, you need PT, OT, ABA, speech therapy, and they come in and they're like, what is autism? So sometimes we're just even breaking down that piece for them and just like helping them work through their, emotions. And that's kind of that like first half, all while kind of keeping an eye on that kiddo as to like, what are they doing in this space? As OTs, we're constantly observing to see what is happening. And then kind of that second half is really getting down on the child's level and connecting with them. What can we see in maybe a small private room, how they interact with, various toys, manipulatives, what do they gravitate towards? And then we're going to bring them into the sensory space, which is super awesome, like indoor play gym, just amazing. Mm-hmm. And we're going to see what do they like? What do they gravitate towards? Kids show us so much about their sensory system and their physical abilities just by playing and doing, on their own. And so we're going to observe that and we're going to take that back to the family and say, hey, I hear your concerns. I see your concerns, and this is what I think we can do to help moving forward.
For like really little kids, I've gone into therapy locations and clinics and seen you literally have like a small, almost like a little small private one-on-one room. And then like you said, you work on maybe more focused things, but then you take them into the sensory gym. And so describe for someone who's never seen a sensory gym, these things are amazing. It's like Disneyland, but not.
I mean, gosh, big, bright, beautiful colors. We have all of our Westside colors throughout the gym. We have so much functional, safe equipment that kids can play on, that they can get sensory input through. We have our monkey bars, we have our swings, we have our crash pits that we can jump into, and just trampolines. I mean, every gym is just equipped with so many wonderful resources. And at first, like when you walk in, you're like, oh my gosh, like that's a lot going on. And sometimes that works in our favor because it's enticing. The kids are like, oh my gosh, what's that place I want to go? Not that they necessarily love us. We hope that they do, but they're like, oh my gosh, that's the gym. Let's go to OT. It's a really fun place, but it can also be kind of a distracting place, which is why, like Alyssa said, we like to pull out to small rooms sometimes too, when we're having a little bit of trouble focusing.
How do you help a parent who, collaborate with a parent when they're trying to set goals? So, they've gone to OT, you've done your evaluation, now you've got goals. How do you, I think a lot of people want instant fixes. We want instant gratification. We want to see things done right away. How can you help manage those expectations with a parent to show them and work with them on getting kids and setting their goals and those milestones? Because it's not always a sprint. A lot of times it's a marathon.
Yeah. And you're right. A lot of parents are just looking for what is that quick fix, or, they have an idea in mind of where their child should be. And therefore they want that to be the goal that we're working towards. And sometimes we have to help parents understand that sometimes there are maybe milestones that we just need to meet before we're going to be successful, with that type of goal. So a really common one that we get sometimes is, our families really want, their kids to work on, handwriting. They want them to write letters. But we might need to take a couple steps back and learn how to first hold a pencil or to, color or just create shapes before we get to that piece. Or maybe we just don't have the attention span yet to participate in those higher, cognitive tasks. And so therefore, we need to help educate them saying like, hey, we really need to work on this piece first. And just because we're working on this doesn't mean we're making progress. It means that we are just, walking up the ladder to get to where we need to be.
Well, I think you always have to have a baseline.
Yeah.
You have to have an established baseline. So how can you help support parents? So like, you think about in school, a kid gets homework. Do you give homework in OT?
Sometimes, yeah, we do. Anything we can do to facilitate carryover with the family or the caregivers is something that we're going to reach for almost every single time. When you put into context the fact that they're with us for about an hour a week and then they're out in the world for the rest of that time, I think it kind of puts into perspective how important it is to be working on all of those skills outside of your OT sessions as well. So yes, we do give homework. It's not like graded homework where we come in and we'll give you like an A+ or a smiley face or, whatever system they're using these days. But we do love to facilitate that carryover. And it gets the family involved too. I've had so many cases where we have kiddos who come in who have siblings that are similarly aged, and some of them are like, well, why are we in OT and our brothers and sisters aren't? And giving them some of those activities lets the whole family participate and makes it feel a little bit better to everybody, I think, in that situation.
And that brings up an interesting point that we've talked about before in other sessions. If a child is getting OT or is going ABA or speech, and another child, their sibling is not, how do you help support that family? And because it's not just the child that's affected, it's the whole family. Mm-hmm. So talk to us a little bit about how you guys support the family and really some ideas or suggestions to really help that other kid.
Yeah. I think a lot of the suggestions and things that we provide to families for the kiddos who are coming to treat us are truthfully great for the family as a whole. That might look like establishing more concrete routines in the home that might help that one child that struggles when things aren't within routine, but that's going to help everybody get out the door in the morning, everyone to get into bed at night, is creating some of those routines. It might be, having some sensory supports in place that can be very play-based and fun that the other kids are going to want to gravitate towards. Maybe you have a kid that, really gets amped up before we go to bed at night, and we want to provide them with some movement so that we can, get tired and regulate and sleep. It might look like we're going to stomp down the hallway to go brush our teeth, or crawl on all fours to go get dressed, or we're going to dance with bubbles while we're putting on our pajamas. And therefore, it looks like it's not, like, hey, this is some, therapy we're placing on our one child, but this is something the whole family can do for fun to be able to be, independent and participate in the things that have to happen in daily life.
One of the things that you kind of, you touched on a little bit is that parents might be confused between, okay, my kid has a behavior problem, or so I think, but it's actually a sensory issue. Kind of walk us through, because that seems like a minefield in of its own.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, like one important thing to note is that sensory is behavior. It doesn't kind of exist without the behavior. And that's not to say that there aren't behaviors that exist without sensory. But if, there's some type of, sensory sensitivity or implication that is causing maybe a kid to have like a large meltdown, bite, kick, scream, to elope out of the room, to not want to participate in specific tasks, those behaviors are related back to, the sensory system. And I think really where, OTs thrive in the behavior space is when, it relates back to sensory or relates back to, what we call our physiological system. So anything that we can help support that might have to deal with like sleep, underlying sensory issues, potentially even like nutrition and feeding, maybe what we call interoception, which is essentially understanding our internal cues. Are we hungry, thirsty? Are we tired? Because those all lead to behaviors sometimes. Now there is a difference, sometimes behaviors that maybe occur because, we're not having access to like a tangible item and we're having like a meltdown. or maybe there is some type of other underlying, issue like an anxiety or a depression or maybe like an OCD that is causing behavior. Sometimes that pushes, out of our realm a little bit, and we might want to refer out to like a counseling or a social work. But I will say a lot of the strategies that we use to help with behaviors in the sensory world oftentimes help in the behavior world too.
On the OT side, if a parent is concerned, it's just, they're so OCD, or understanding that, what is OCD and what is not OCD. So if a kid likes things a certain way, I like things a certain way. But I think, when does it become a problem?
It's a good question. Again, I kind of fall back on that massive interference with daily life. We do see a lot of rigidity in kiddos, whether they're neurotypical, whether they have an ASD diagnosis. We've been seeing an increase in that, I would say, over the past couple years. I think part of that is the world that we're living in. It's been a little bit scarier, and kids haven't been exposed to the things that they have been in the past because of social distancing and the things that they needed to do while they were growing up. And so, I think with all of that, it kind of puts them in a little bit different of a context.
Yeah. For something like OCD, where how can you work with a child who, like, for example, they have to have, they have to have all of their toys in a certain way. And if those toys are not in a certain way, they have a massive meltdown. What are some things, if that's kind of one of the goals in emotional regulation that you're helping with, how can you guide then a parent to work at home to kind of reinforce some of those skills?
Yeah. I think that, sometimes it necessarily isn't, changing that piece of them, but adapting, truthfully. It's not our goal and our intention to, help a kid fix all their little quirks necessarily, but maybe educate families about that this is a need, of theirs, and how can we put this into their routines or to create this adaptation so that, we're not going to have these big, massive meltdowns. Now, we recognize too that this is an imperfect world, right? Not everything is always going to go, the way that you want it to. But then those are the times where we're going to teach families and kiddos how to use coping skills on the back end or before those big meltdowns occur so that we can, regulate through that piece, right? Teaching them the skills to help them through it. So.
Well, and you had a really good point. The world is not what it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and more children are being diagnosed and having sensory issues. And you had on a real point. We're not trying to, OT is not to just, quote, fix the kid. And so much of that is understanding that their environment also has to be adapted. So what are some walk us through some of the success stories you've had with kids that have really, and let's kind of redefine what is success. It's not like one day I'm lining up everything, my color-coded jelly beans, and next day I'm just reaching in and grabbing them all. Give us, because I think parents would like to understand, what are some successes, what do successes look like in OT?
They just vary so much. It can literally be going from rolling over, the simplest thing, a 6-year-old now has finally rolled over. Or it could be that, the kiddo who has so much trouble going out into into different environments, into public, into the community, was able to go to dinner with his family the other night for the first time without having any sort of sensory disruptions or anything like that. It's so variable. Maybe the kid wrote "I love you" to his mom for the first time. It really just depends on the kiddo. And I think that's what I love about OT the most, is that you can find wins in almost anything that we do.
One of the things that someone else was talking recently about is we harp so much on what they're doing wrong, but I feel like OT really breaks that down and says, well, this is what the kid's doing right. And you're really reinforcing those good behaviors and growing them into, I might not be able to write, my name perfectly, but I can now hold a pen correctly. And it's okay to take, I don't want to say 2 steps back, 5 steps forward, but sometimes you do have to start at the beginning. And not all kids develop linearly. They don't all, develop on a straight line. So how can you help parents feel like they're a part of this process and not just kind of standing by, letting things happen?
Yeah, that's what we're all about. I think Allie mentioned earlier, we see these kids 1 to 2 hours, a week, and then we send them, out into the world with their families. And oftentimes we see that, a lot of the concerns that parents have are things that are happening at home, at school. They're not happening, in our super fun clinic with, a bunch of, gym equipment and things like that. So we are making them a part of the process from day one. And that's going to start with, getting their concerns. And then during sessions, it's going to be, we're going to talk to them 5 to 10 minutes before the session and after the session. And we're going to break down what happened during the week and how the session went. And we're going to provide those, strategies right then and there. We're going to provide them maybe with that homework or those home exercise programs. So that carryover piece is going to happen in the home. We reach out sometimes and we communicate with teachers and therapy teams in schools so that we're all on the same page and we're looking at the child holistically, because us 1 hour a week isn't, going to solve all the problems.
And I think, in this episode, we've kind of focused on more the littles. I think the next episode, I want to talk about bigger kids. But how do you help a parent, especially of a little, that they're navigating OT, they're navigating ABA, they're navigating speech? Like, how can you help them just not get burnt out?
Yeah. My favorite thing is to remind parents that they're human too. They're trying to do so much for their kids. They're trying to be their biggest advocate. They're trying to shuttle them around everywhere. Oftentimes they have a lot of other kiddos that they have to have places to, that they need childcare for. And it can be overwhelming. It can be complex. It can come with a lot of hard feelings, but it can also come with a lot of wins. And I think emphasizing those wins and meeting those families where they're at based on how they're feeling that moment, that second, we're always working to make things better for you. That is our ultimate goal. So whether we can try to back your therapy so you're coming less days throughout the week, or if the home exercise program that we gave you is too much, we can cut that down. We can figure out something that works a little bit better for you because we're here to help you.
Yeah. And, I think kind of on top of that, what are some myths, or I should say misunderstandings, that you wish more parents understood, like myth busting 101 for OT? Like, there are just a lot of misconceptions out there. One, that kids don't need OT. I think that's probably one of the biggest ones. OT's for adults. Mm-hmm. So kind of walk us through some of the misconceptions or things that you've heard parents say that you're like, nope, they need to go to OT.
I feel like the first thing that kind of came to my mind, and it's not necessarily strictly OT, but, we're not here to quote unquote fix, your child. We're here to help educate and to find the supports to be able to help them participate, in daily life, right? We're not trying to change who they are. We're trying to help them to be able to do what they want to do in life, whether it's the kid, the family, or, or both. And so I think the myth there is that, they're not coming to us so we can, cure whatever it is they have. They're coming to us so that, we can help support them and provide them with the supports they need,
Yeah. And one of the things too, I always want to kind of let parents know is, parents can ask for help. Parents can ask for help. It's okay. Mm-hmm. They don't have to shoulder this burden alone. And I think you guys are incredible at supporting the parent, whether it's a caregiver training, whether it's a counseling session. Westside and the OT and the counseling team, the speech team, you guys don't just work in a vacuum. I mean, it really is a truly collaborative experience for the family.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of my favorite parts is when you're working together with a whole team, then everybody's on the same page. Everybody can move forward in a consistent, stable way that's going to be in the best interest of that kiddo. And that's what it's all about.
And if you think about, it's like an OT for younger kiddos, I would say the under 10 before we get to the teen, but real littles, kids are very malleable. They like to please and they like to play, and it's okay if things aren't going how you think they should go. And that's really, I think, where OT can really, OT just fits and checks so many boxes, whether it's executive functioning, whether it's sensory. So what are kind of some last sort of minute thing, or, last few things, like tips that you would give parents? Is there, if they're questioning about OT or they have concerns? I think the first thing is get an evaluation, right? I mean, it doesn't hurt to get an evaluation.
Yeah.
call, reach out, talk to one of us. We can help kind of like sift out like whether or not you think you should come in for, an evaluation or not. I would always say that, rather than sit back, just try it, right? Like there's no harm that can come out of, coming in for an evaluation. If anything, it's just more, education. So.
And for some easier access for families, we do offer free screenings for OT.
And I think that's really important. I think that we don't want that to be a barrier for kids. Like a parent,
Absolutely.
you do free screenings. There's some, we talked about this in other episodes, like tools. For example, in our speech episode, one of our speech therapists, she loves using bubbles. Like that's just her thing that like every kid loves. Are there certain tools that you guys find have been helpful in your OT sessions that have transferred over and have given kids and just an opportunity, or just it's a good tool for parents to use? Whether it's like bubbles or are there certain books out there or websites that if parents just want to find out more information, if not, the best resource really is the two of you.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's a great question. Because bubbles is a winner. Every kid loves a good bubble and just our sensory space, in general. I would say that, when we're talking about like, tools, materials, and for the home and things like that, like you don't have to go out and, buy your own sensory gym, for the home. You can create structure and sensory input in the home through, pulling out couch cushions, jumping off of your, bed into like a beanbag, creating an obstacle course within your home.
Blanket burrito.
Blanket swinging them, crashing them,
Pillow squishes.
Yeah.
A pillow fort.
Pillow fort. Yeah.
Giving a hug,
Yeah.
I love that. Well, thank you, ladies. This was part 1 of our 2-part episode of OT for Littles and Big. Stay tuned for the next one. We'll be right back in session.